Welcome to what really is a truly remarkable exhibition at this, the very beginning of Canberra's centenary year. And much of what you see here today has never been seen publicly before. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Jeremy Lassick. I'm thrilled to be your MC today and involved on a daily basis with the centenary. It's an amazing project and we're all very excited. Today isn't the beginning. Obviously we're almost 2 weeks in, but it's a significant milestone. I think I can say with some confidence that none of us here today, correct me if I'm wrong, actually witnessed the original naming ceremony of Canberra, just a short distance from here on the 12th of March in 1913. It was more than a very special occasion in Australia's nationhood. It almost certainly will never, ever happen again, anywhere. The christening of a capital, not of a country, but of a continent.
David, thank you so much for joining us here today. So first of all, can you just give us an overview of this exhibition and what it's all about?
Okay, it's called But Once in a History. I pinched it off King O'Malley, and it's only appropriate that we're sitting here in King O'Malley's pub. King O'Malley was the Minister for Home Affairs for the 3 years that Labor was in government. In this case, it was the second Fisher government, but it lasted the whole 3 years. They had a majority in both houses, they pushed an agenda, and he was the Minister for Home Affairs. He talked about this being an opportunity for this country that comes along but once in a history, hence the title of the exhibition. But I focused in on the two of the major three ceremonies of the day, namely the ones that we pretty much all Canberrans know, the foundation stones ceremony, where the foundation stones were literally laid with golden trowels that were used in the cement and actually laid, so that was done in a very professional manner with the Prime Minister, the Governor-General and Minister O'Malley. And then very shortly after that you went to the singing of a hymn, commonly referred to as Psalm 100, the Old Hundredth. It was the only bit of Christian ceremony in the two public ceremonies. And then finally you had Lady Denman stepping to the front of the podium, which had a crimson boarding with crimson cloth on the top. So the main dignitaries, Lord and Lady Denman, King O'Malley and Prime Minister Fisher were on top of that, whereupon Lady Denman came to the front and amidst a real hush, she opened the gold case that was inscribed to herself, and there was the name of the new city, and it would be called Canberra.
There's no doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that the opening of this exhibition marks the first significant event on the centenary of Canberra calendar. Planning for our centenary celebrations started, I'm sure you're all aware, many years ago, but it is wonderful to finally be here at the start of what will be Canberra's biggest ever year. And it is fitting that the very first major event of this year is this, the launch of an exhibition that explores the fascinating origins of our national capital and brings us back to the ceremonies that launched our great city 100 years ago. The Centenary of Canberra History and Heritage Advisor, Dr. David Headon, has indeed curated an exhibition that invites us to explore the behind-the-scenes stories of the foundation of the national capital. These stories deserve to be better known than they are. The ACT government is a very proud supporter of this exhibition and values the contribution, the events and projects that are this year celebrating the history and the heritage of our city. The Centenary program is one that passionately revisits the past, embraces the possibilities of the present, and perhaps most importantly, keenly anticipates the promise of the future. So today, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to revisit this past by exploring this remarkable exhibition.
So why is this so relevant to Canberra's 100th birthday this year?
Well, here we are in 2013. I'm always dealing 100 years in the past. In 2013, of course, we are moving in on the 12th of March. The big day of the foundation stones and the naming and the luncheon speeches was the 12th of March 1913. It was only appropriate in what is such a full and superb program throughout the year that we give special attention to that special day, the day that we are recognising, that we now celebrate, as we know, as Canberra Day, that we recognise precisely what happened on that day and the stories around it. So not just the events of the day, but the personalities, the people who contributed, and they're not just Prime Minister, Governor-General, Minister for Home Affairs, Lady Denman, but a number of the locals who contributed in various ways, and also people like, for example, the police that had to be brought down for this special occasion from New South Wales. There effectively was no Canberra at that stage. There was certainly no federal police force, so they had to come from both New South Wales and I'm pretty sure Victoria, but most came from New South Wales. And I'm pleased to say that one of the nicest items in the entire exhibition is the only bit of memorabilia I know, which is a very small box with a cigar. I do believe it's 3 cigarettes and some matches, which appear to be the only effort made for some kind of souvenir of the day, other than all the literature attached to the invitations.
So apart from what you just mentioned, what other parts of the exhibition are your favourite?
Given that I'm the curator, fair to say that in fact it's very difficult for me to choose right across the exhibition. But I'd have to say that the late break that we got with a connection to the Denman family in England, and indeed with some parts of the family here in Australia, and it was as a result of connecting to the family that we got some of the most beautiful items, and really memorable items that had never been shown before. So, for example, the naming case that was opened by Lady Denman to reveal the name Canberra, being shown for the first time in this exhibition. So the hat that Lord Denman wore, rather Napoleonic looking hat, complete with its plumage, white feathers and pink feathers, which are on it in the exhibition, the very one that he wore. But this stuff is being shown publicly for the very first time. Throw into the mix the parasol that Lady Denman had there, a scrapbook that was kept by her lady-in-waiting. And then I suppose if I was really going, and there's so much material, but going to the items that have a special place for me, one is another album, and that's an album that was given by Jack Mildenhall. Now, those who know their Canberra history would know that all the great photos of the Parliament being built, old Parliament, the Provisional Parliament, in the 20s and 30s, sheep, etc., are Mildenhall photographs. I think there are 8,000 online in the National Archives online material. Now, Mildenhall, when he was getting on, and in 1944, went next door to his Mugaway neighbours, and he gave an album to John and Judy Stevenson, and John Stevenson was kind enough, and Judy, to not only allow me to have access to the album, but also to digitise those photographs, so that the photographs of 1913 that were part of the possessions of Jack Mildenhall, who came online as the great Canberra photographer in the 20s, but they are the most beautiful, the most pristine photographs, the clearest photographs of the day I've ever seen.
But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to invite Senator Lumby to formally open the exhibition.
Thank you, Andrew. To begin with, this is the first exhibition of what promises to be an immense centenary year. It is curated, of course, by the Centenary's History and Heritage Advisor, Dr. David Headon. His intellectual commitment to the history in the context of the centenary year, and what I can only describe as unbridled enthusiasm for what has gone before us, has contributed so much already, and as you can see through his curation of this exhibition, is underpinned by a rigour that we have not seen before in the context of this material or this subject matter. So thank you, David. It is our centenary year, a celebration that is not just about those of us who live in Canberra, who share this beautiful city, but it's a celebration on behalf of the whole nation. We are the national capital, and in this way, every single Canberran has a special responsibility, if you like. We are all collectively custodians of the national treasures and the history that sits within the boundaries of the Australian Capital Territory. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a true privilege for me to declare this exhibition, but once in history, Canberra's foundation and naming stone ceremony, 12th of March 1913, officially opened.
Canberra has a wonderful story. So we were very switched on to the best of design, of progressive design. So it was always going to be the case that there would be an international competition to design the Canberra, the Australian national capital. In the event, it was announced that 137 entries that we had for that competition. My research more recently has shown that there could have been as many as 400. Now, that means that something like 250 of them were for people like you and I, who were aspiring. We would love to see our design as the national capital. Well, unfortunately, we're not surveyors or engineers or architects, so those 250 were basically sort of shifted to the side. The Griffins in Chicago, arguably the most progressive design city in the world through that period, so that when they won our competition, it was probably right and proper. Here were two people from the most progressive city in the world, two of the most progressive thinkers in terms of design in the world, win our competition. You know, what's not to like about that story? You know, there's a story about which we know far too little, if anything at all. So that, you know, your original question, what do we want? We want to actually move, by the end of this year, to having a better appreciation, some appreciation of the sheer quality of Canberra's story, of the foundation years of the foundation story. And if we can do that in the context of enlivening people's interest in their capital generally, but in the history of their capital in particular, then we really will have succeeded.
And following on from that, the perception of Canberra from not necessarily Australians, but from overseas and everything like that, Canberra doesn't tend to exist in terms of people overseas thinking Sydney or Melbourne are the big cities, they're the capitals. How are we going to help create that image for Canberra?
It's not easy, because at the end of the day, all you can do is kind of keep banging away in as many different forums as you can possibly create. We've done that, I think, pretty darn successfully so far, and no doubt that, you know, everything will be ramped up between now and the end of the year. But again, it's a good question, because, you know, when people overseas, if they're asked, many people, you know, what's the capital? Well, they're going to say Sydney or Melbourne, usually Sydney. And then you pointed, Gabe, to the myth of Canberra resulting from a sort of a compromise between the two cities. You know, typically nothing could be further from the truth in terms of the latter point, because it was such a complex story. There were so many statistics, there was so much debate, there were so many really important, significant, intelligent, engaged people applying themselves to the capital story. I'm not sure at the end of the day the sort of glamorous, glitzy image is the one we want for our national capital. The fact is, I've said it many times before and I'll say it here, and that is that I believe that the Griffins' design of 100 years ago was never going to get any kind of proper implementation because of, as we know in the history of the 20th century, Australia, like so many countries, 2 world wars and a depression. It was always going to impact, and it did. I believe the 21st century is going to be the century when the footprint of the design, which is undoubtedly what we have now, can be in some way embellished to incorporate, not everything, because it's a design at the end of the day of 100 years ago, but other elements. I think the Griffin plan is a sustainable plan for the 21st century. And I think, you know, the pressure is on us to get it right throughout this century.